Okay, good morning out there. It is now 6 in the morning. It is Thursday, December 12th. This is like the third time I'm attempting to do this morning because my technology is just not working for me today. I've been knowing for a long time I do need to update my computer. It's been a while, but now it's affecting other things like my camera actually staying on for a while on my desktop. So it's been a shit show already this morning. But I'm pretty excited to tell you about this latest read that I have here. Um, I know I've done, 4 episodes so far of these Dresden Files, but like I've said in every one of them, I am loving these. I've probably got another dozen more to go on my bookshelf for this whole series. So, from my count. So, unless he publishes more, that's about as many as you're going to see going on here. Um, and something, I think that's going to be my goal during 2025 is finish the Dresden Files all the way from now until a year from now. So I'll tell you what, these books are marketed at like 450 to 500 pages, give or take. They're fast reads. I'm just so excited to see, what he has to tell me next. That to do that in that amount of time isn't difficult. Not at all, I don't believe. So I think it goes up to his last novel is called Battleground, which might be the 17th novel in the series. So, hey, we'll see how that whole thing goes. In any event, welcome to another edition of Joe's Book Review. This is, I think, my 47th installment of this series since I decided starting to do it about 2 years ago or so. Where basically I'm going to tell you about a book I just read. Sometimes it'll be about a summary, sometimes it'll be a critique. One thing it does great for me is it does help me with my retention of the content of the pages because when I'm all said and done, besides just going along for the journey the writer and the author has taken me upon, I've now got to be able to remember what happened to give, a good little synopsis or critique of it right here. With critiques, by the way, I know there's a huge popularity out there with people who just have a channel dedicated to just shitting on things. Um, that is definitely not what I'm doing here. Because for the most part, I don't want to pick up a book that's going to be shitty. So I just avoid it if possible, unless it becomes part of like a certain genre I love and I'm jumping into that one fully. And one of the installments happens to be one I'm not very much a fan of. But that's not what the point I'm doing here. I'm trying to share things. So, like I said, I've done probably about 5 of these already. This is the sixth book in this series. Um, and here it is, Jim Butcher, novel of the Dresden Files, this one being called Blood Rites. Okay? Um, might not haven't heard of these books before, but let me give you a little primer here just to get you up to speed with the basics of it. See, one of the cool things about it is even though it's got a mythos and world building that does build from book to book, and it gives you more of a vast world or a vast universe that everything takes place in, the stories do have a form of episodic nature to them. So you have the ability to possibly just pick one up randomly and read it through. You might not know the history of some of the co-characters in there, but a good author generally gives you the quick little primer of who your person is and what they do. Now, that's the thing that there's times where if you're reading a book series, you have to constantly hear the same things every time you're introduced to characters in the installment that you're reading. Uh, Two obvious things comes to mind is Sue Grafton has the alphabet murders. A is for alibi, B is for whatever. And as you go through there, she has her little cast of characters, like a woman in the diner or a cop or whatever, a detective. And every time you see them again, you have to go through the exact same preamble every single time. And if you're reading them like one after another, banging out a whole series, you can kind of be like, yeah, I know all this already. You have to get past it. But it's not being written that way for you per se. It's being written for anybody. The second, let me try this again. The second example I can think of is Andrew Vox is a great writer. His books are fantastic, very gritty, very down to the street level. And he's got this Burke series, which has about 18 books. And Burke lives off the grid, and he's kind of a nasty man, almost like an anti-hero kind of thing. But his collection of people that's part of his cadre, every new book, you kind of get like a little primer for every one of them every time you see them. So it's never just like, oh, you know who these people are. We're not even going to talk about their background or how he knows them when we go to like book 8, book 9, book 10. So every time you have to get that same kind of preamble of who they are. So it's something that might irk slightly people who are reading the whole series, but I think it's normally made for people who might just pick up this one installment in the middle. And that's why you get a good synopsis of the what has gone on before in order to jump into these things. So, with that in mind, I'm going to do that for Dresden right now, real quick, and then get on with the rest of this. So, the genre of these books, I believe, is called urban fantasy. So basically, it's like magic in a city. So you're taking fantasy realm and putting it into contemporary society of America, let's say. Um, you've got the present day, according to whatever year the book is published, and so that means science, technology, logic, the current age of man, if you will. And then you add to that wizards, warlocks, all sorts of magical entities and the like, and you've essentially got urban fantasy, as I can as quickly describe that as possible. It's great for some to enjoy, others don't like it. So that's why it's kind of like its own section of genre that people can say, no, I want my fantasy to be castles and wilderness and dragons. I don't want it to be, Manhattan or Chicago or San Francisco. So to each his own for the best of us. Okay. So these books particularly follow one wizard. His name is Harry Dresden. And actually, his full name is Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden. So he's got like 3 or 4 separate magicians in his name. Harry Houdini, Blackstone, who actually also did a huge line of children's toys to teach you magic. David Copperfield and I think David, I could be missing the right one, and Dresden himself. So he works as a private investigator in Chicagoland. He's actually listed in the Yellow Pages under Wizard. And of course, he's the only person listed under that title. And he's even got a business card, Harry Dresden, Wizard. Lost items found, paranormal investigations, consulting, advice, reasonable rates. No love potions, endless purses, parties, or other entertainment. So he's trying to be serious, saying, like, listen, I literally am a wizard that will do things for you wizard-like. I'm not here to do, I'm not a genie granting you wishes. And while he has a PI business which brings him income, most of his income comes from Chicago Police Department. Okay, he gets called in from a friend who's been placed in a unit called Special Investigations, and if something weird crosses their desk, they usually give him a call, give him a consulting fee for a look-see. And the main cop there is Karen Murphy. Dresden lives in a basement apartment. He's got a fat stray cat named Mister, and an ethereal entity that helps him out with magical knowledge known as Bob, who resides inside a little crystal skull in the basement of his apartment. Bob is a lover of soap opera, Harlequin romances, and looks forward to every now and again being allowed a 24-hour pass to leave the skull and go about Chicago doing whatever the hell he wants, where he generally goes out and finds sororities and strip clubs and things of that nature. Harry's mother died during childbirth. His father was a stage wizard, and he died when he was a little boy, and they sent him down the orphanage route. Okay? He has to, generally speaking, being a wizard, Harry has to follow kind of like the rules of the wizarding world, because he's kind of involved with this council of white wizards, and they oversee magic in the real world. They don't want people to use magic for their own gain, or especially to kill mortals. Like, keep those two realms as separate as possible because that can happen. And these wizards don't like him very much. They think he's a wild card and a jackass, and they always try to throw the rulebook at him. And because of him and his lifestyle of trying to be public as a wizard, he's essentially broke most of the time. So you're really following this dude who's scraping by as best he can, just on the outskirts of a large city. And that's who he is. That's the primer of this guy. And by the way, I keep looking up because on my computer screen above here is my notes of what I'm going to talk about today. So if you see me keep looking up, that's exactly the reason why I don't have all this thing up here. So those are the super easy basics for Harry Dresden and who you're following in these books, okay? There's obviously a ton more into the backstory, into the villains, into the foes, into the various different realms of magic and monsters and the like. But I just wanted to put a little lay of the land out there so you see this is what we're talking about, this is who we're talking about, in case this might be one of your first installments. Like I said, if you've seen me do some of these before or read them yourself or even seen other people talk about the books, you know this. But for the newbie, this is your introduction, okay? And this works pretty well for the books, because again, they're one part episodic, and another part when you go through this kind of a thing in the beginning of these books or when you introduce the new people, you get caught up on the details you might need to know if they'll happen to pick up, let's say, this book 6 as your first in the universe. You won't be completely lost by doing so. You get enough background story to say, hey, there's a war going on that he started and it's getting pretty bad between these two factions. And now we take off where we're here. If you ever wanted to know why there's a war or how it started, then you read the history to catch up. So you might not know some of the detail work in the trials and tribulations of what has come before, but you get enough to enjoy as much the continuation in the world and its world building. And Jim Butcher is fair enough in his writing to give you these primers as well, where you find our hero where he is today, and you can take off with us on the new journey of whatever the new book happens to be. So now I've spent 10 minutes or so talking about where we were. Let me hit the ground running on this novel. Okay. Again, book 6, Blood Rites. Gotta hold this a little higher. Blood Rites by Jim Butcher. Okay. And as always, literally, we hit the start of the story with our hero hitting the ground running. Okay. Jim Butcher loves to give you this end of a caper introductory chapter where you hit action immediately. Okay. And the best part about it is he doesn't do one of those 3 weeks earlier. It's just the end of another caper that doesn't really tie in as much to the main story, but you're just seeing our hero in action and you get up to speed on his latest and then you move on from there. Okay. And it truly does get your energy up, and you generally in these opening chapters get to see some of the magic right away. And of course, some of the danger that the hero gets himself into. And in this one, we see Harry Dresden saving some puppies. Yeah, puppies. Okay. And he's literally fleeing from monsters who are legit trying to spit fire at him. And he does his best to get out of the situation as magically and as dumb luckily as he's able to. Okay. And then, these monsters after him are like these impish little demonized monkey critters. And as they're trying to get him and they're failing and they're missing and whatever else, they get irate themselves because monsters can have feelings and emotions as well if need be. So they then start jumping on one another and you're like, what the hell's going on here? And then it turns out as they keep doing that, they start to magically like mass up, and they start morphing into like an even bigger demonized monkey critter. or at this point, monkey beast. It's like they're coming in and they're forming like Monkey Voltron or Kongtron, if you will. And now we got to get to figure out to see how our little hero is going to deal with this thing. So, again, gets you excited right away. So, for the purposes of this video, one of the things I like to do is try to keep things a little spoiler free as I do. I'm going to leave off that part of what happens next. You'll enjoy the rest of the opener if you pick this up. You know, obviously, because there's more to the book and there's other books, our hero's not dying immediately and it moves on. But, it's a fun beginning to get you into things. Okay? So now the main story, as we immediately get into, because he's he has like a driver in his car that helps him get away, and then that driver kind of launches the next adventure in there. Our story kind of goes into one of those like day in the life adventures. So you kind of get like a regular caper, almost like someone got him out of the Yellow Pages, only it came through his friend Thomas. That happens here. So, and it's good to get those every now and again. It's not always like, hey, here's the universe and he's got to get plugged into the next trial along the way. Sometimes you just want to see what happens on Thursday type of story. So the guy that was driving the car is his friend, or kind of more of an acquaintance because he's a vampire. And in the universe of the Dresden Files, vampires typically fall into like 3 courts. Okay, they call them the Red Court, the Black Court, and the White Court. And I try not to spoil things of what's going to happen next for myself, so I don't read a lot online, try to see what happens. But I think I did accident upon that there might even be a 4th called the Jade Court. I haven't seen them yet, I don't believe, but that's neither here nor there. One thing that's important if you're writing fiction, that in these books, sometimes it's very important to figure out, or to tell your audience, what are your vampires like? Because it might be that, people have seen Dracula movies or read books, or they're really into the vampire genre, or maybe they just seen Twilight once or twice. Vampires from book to book can be a little bit different, or some follow, like, we'll call it the same rules. Brandon Sanderson mentioned one day, but if your vampires for some reason follow a different set of rules, you've got to establish that so people don't think, hey, vampires don't do that. They only do this kind of a thing. So Jim Butcher does make sure that you understand, hey, I've got these vampires in 3 courts of white, red, and black. I got to tell you what the difference is between them, because maybe they feed off people differently, or maybe they have different abilities from one another, or maybe they're all the same. So Jim Butcher's vampires, most of them follow that same old vampire thing, and again, not putting them down at all, where they're very, very strong, or they're very, very fast, or their reflexes are lightning quick. They all feed on humans different ways as well, but he defines that. Red and black vampires will literally suck the blood out of you. That's where they get their life force, where they get their energy. But these white court vampires, they kind of like absorb your essence in a way. So they're not breaking into you, they might just feed on your aura. Feelings are something that make them go. Like, they're more empathic in their feeding. Love is the most potent feeling that they can get, but they don't go the blood route. Another thing that Jim Butcher's vampires do is they tend to ensnare humans in some fashion or other. He calls them thralls. You're enthralled by the vampire. Sorry. The Black Court will kind of use mind control and take you over, and you become like their slave. The Red Court, when they go to suck on, say, the blood from your artery, their saliva ends up being almost like a narcotic, and the narcotic would seduce you, and that's how you're enthralled to them. And the White Court, you become almost addicted to their absorbing prowess when they come on you. So they kind of like are the nice vampires in a certain way, not fully definitely, but they'll maybe like do a lot of one night stands and get people that way and spread it out. Because if they take one over and over again, that person will always want to sleep with them and never want to stop giving their essence and will eventually be like withered away almost. So they use love and sex, whatever, absorbed from their victims. And the white court vampires are normally just beautiful people because these emotions are actually making them physically a beautiful presence. So this acquaintance vampire of Harry's is a white court vampire. Okay, his name is Thomas Wraith. Okay, we've actually seen him before in prior novel or two where he does help Harry out when he can. Okay, and things are cool between them because of the events in recent books. Harry, and by extension his affiliation with the White Council of Magicians, is fighting against the Red Court. And they generally are always fighting against the Black Court of vampires. And while the White Court is not technically a part of the battleground per se in these recent books, they are vampires. So the White Council will go after them. Even though they're the better vampires, so to speak, they still belong to vampires. So this is how that we segue into the thrilling opening scene, from the thrilling opening scene to the main story. All right. Thomas has a friend who's a movie producer. Well, he's a porn movie producer, and he's been like plagued recently. All right. Not biblical plagues, just, his actresses have been killed by extremely wild ways. One went to go into a limo, and when they opened up the back door, a swarm of bees was inside and just completely attacked and killed her. Another one was hit by a car, which doesn't seem like, all right, that happens every day, I'm sure, but she was hit by a car while water skiing. So, typical stuff, right? So, as they're talking about it, Harry's mind thinks, he goes, this just sounds like a curse. Somehow there's a curse plaguing this movie producer. And they come up with this concept that they call an entropy curse, where everything, goes towards chaos in a way. And this is something that would make it up Harry's alley to go and investigate versus the cops trying to figure out. So, like I said, we get Harry into like just the groove of working a case. It's just a regular work day for him. And this case ends up being a non-special investigations unit. So there's no Chicago PD involved in what he has to do now. It's just him, his wiles, and his abilities. A day in the life. So that kind of works good for us because we get to see a different aspect of how he works, who he works with or doesn't work with from one book to another. And, like most of the books, keeping the action going, now that Harry's agreed, hey, I'll help you out, Thomas, and they're driving away from this monkey Voltron, bam, vampire attack. So now it's like he goes from one chaos right to another. And this is non-entropy curse related. It's just he's going bam, bam. So the action sequences are happening pretty fast. And he's weary from the first battle. So now he has to find a way to survive the second battle. Not just win, but just survive. Because like I said before, there's this war going on between the White Council and the Red and the Black vampires. So this kind of came about by the end of the events in the book 3 called Grave Peril. So these random ambushes can literally, come out of the bushes. And here they do. Fun stuff. And you get to see, again, Harry gets to use more of his magic. He's even, because this war is going on constantly, has some like homemade weapons, these anti-vampire weapons in his car, like in a box in the back seat. So he'll like go and pull out like a water balloon filled with holy water, or maybe some flares to help him burn vampires along the way. But he's prepared, and we see him using his preparations up front. So it's just fun stuff. Now, there's one thing that makes this encounter just a little bit different, and it's not the attack per se, okay? It is not the magical defenses or, the co-fight that Harry and Thomas perform that's interesting to engage in. It's Harry's response to this after the event is over, okay? Because he's just getting fed up now. He literally is being attacked randomly in every book almost, and he goes, and by the way, when I say fed up, there's no pun intended with vampires sucking blood. He's just like, I'm done with this stuff. He's sick of it. And now he's like, I'm not taking the defensive anymore. He's going to get together some trusted folk and attack them straight ahead, head on. I'm going to hunt them down now. I mean, Harry's pretty much taking a book out of John Carpenter's Vampires and is going to find a lair, find a nest, and just kill them all and take them out in big chunks that he can. So he goes to recruit a small team. And this is where you get your kind of like crew assembly where it's like the Magnificent Seven, or maybe even the Seven Samurai style of just getting people together. Only Harry doesn't really have many people he trusts enough, so it's going to be more like the Magnificent Three. And his plan is simple. He'll get his little spirit guy Bob, let him out of his skull for 24 hours, let him inhabit the body of the cat Mister, and have him track down where the vampires might be holed up. And then once he finds out where they are, when the sun rises, he's going to go and he's going to go kill them. And especially the head bad vampire by the name of Marva. Simple, right? And with his crew, he signs up his CPD confidant, Karen Murphy, who he's generally resisted getting her all in on the supernatural world. Because in the past, he's actually withheld information from her about what actually goes on, in the magical real world. And because of that, she's been estranged from him because she's like, hey, you're lying to me. You're withholding information. I can't trust you. He's brought on a case to help her solve the case. And then he solves it himself, and then she's got nothing to go on. She needs evidence and people to put away to make her investigation successful. And him doing that to protect her has put a rift between them. And this had actually happened as recently as the end of the first novel. But then slowly, they got the relationship back together. And then slowly, book by book, Harry kind of puts more trust in her and told her more and brought her into his world more about what's really out there. So she's on the team and she's all for it because he's literally saved her life before. And then he goes and hires what I'll just call a freelance peacekeeping agent, to take a term for one of my favorite people in the Marvel Universe, to help him out. This guy named Jared Kincaid. Pretty cool name there. And he met him in the last book where he was just a hired bodyguard for this entity called the Archive, right? And he's your typical like guns and grenades badass kind of guy. But he does have a heavy backstory behind him, which we get a glimpse in the prior novel and a little bit in this novel, and it does help make for more of an interesting read. But he might have a little supernatural in him as well. Again, the world builds slowly but thoroughly. And even at the last minute, he actually gets another person named Ebenezer McCoy, who had mentored Harry during his orphanage days, when he just didn't know about magic as much as being a real magic, because his father was a stage magician and his mother died in childbirth. And Harry looks up to him, with some respect. And in this novel, we get two major things about this person they're delving into more. One, that that Ebenezer knows Kincaid from the past, and they literally want to kill each other on sight, which gives you that little tension when that occurs. And while Ebenezer did mentor Harry, he was originally supposed to kill him. And he's kind of like the White Council's hitman. But the White Council rules kind of prevent hitmen from supposedly existing, so that was kind of an interesting nuance there. And this will throw a wrench into Harry's mental world that will affect him for a long time, even after this novel's over. So to fast forward their story a little bit, instead of like keep cutting back and forth, they find a den of vampires, they hunt them down, rescue a bunch of kids, and there's just an amazing battle that occurs here. Magic and guns combined against these people and the people they're trying to hunt. And one, all right, sorry. I went too forward in my notes. And in this battle, Harry's actually able to dig deep down inside him and actually summons like hellfire in order to use against these vampires. He does a little flame on thing like Johnny Storm and starts trying to roast them. But there's a twofold issue because of this. Okay, number one, he's always known that deep down within him, he had the innate ability to summon great power if he really, really needed it. And his ability to do that scares the living bejesus out of Harry. Okay? And he's very sure that this deep down magic is a very dark magic. And when you start playing with dark magic, it might consume you and bring you down a terrible, evil path. And he's very confident that's not what he wants to do. He does not want to go down that path because he knows if he starts down that path, he might never come back. And then he might end up being like the number one most wanted from the White Council. And interestingly enough, this is a part of Dresden that they actually sense, that other people sense in him. And early on in his magic career, they've seen this. And it's kind of the primary reason why Ebenezer was told to mentor him. And if you see him start to do this, kill him. So they give you all this right away, and it's amazing. And secondly, there's kind of a holdover effect of him able to do this from the prior book. Because in that one, the monsters they went out there were called Denarians. Okay. And the Denarians were 30 fallen angels that reside in Judas Iscariot's 30 denarii of silver that he got for betraying Jesus Christ. So at the end of the book, Harry picks up one of these silver coins of a fallen angel named of Laciel, who was a Denarian, and it kind of branded himself, the coin branded on his hand because it had a sigil of Laciel. And it allowed some of the essence of that fallen to embed itself inside of Harry. So he's holding this thing like one of the baddies in Raiders of the Lost Ark on his hand. And it's looking for a way to get out. So it might fuel Harry's abilities as a way to tempt him to allow her in. So all of this, to me, is very cool. And I hope it becomes very cool for you as well. So that was a bit of fast forwarding in the book, but it's a very good and concise way to describe that part of the storyline, again, without too much spoilers and without going back and forth between one story and another. But in this Day of the Life story that we're talking about with the porn director, this one even has some amazing consequences. And like I said, Thomas gets Harry to check out this indie porn producer friend who has a curse following him on his new movie production. And it starts out goofy enough, Harry's got to blend in as part of not the cast, but the crew of a porn being made. And he's trying to interview people along the way. And he's also got to stay away from some of the camera equipment because wizards have a tendency to short out technology. They don't mesh very well. So he's got to be around, but be out of the way simultaneously. And you get to see him oaf and bumble around beautiful porn actresses, and they're wearing next to nothing clothing and so on. And one of these happens to be a character named Laura Romani. Okay, and she has a little sister that's also there named Denari. We get to find out soon enough that Laura Romani is very, very beautiful and enchanting because she is Laura Wraith. And That's the sister of his friend Thomas Wraith of the White Court of Vampires. So it's not a bad way for White Court vampires to live in the world as normal people, being in the porn industry, because there's now plenty of essence to absorb during the act, so to speak. So, and there's a nice little subplot where the little sister Inari doesn't know she's a White Court vampire, and they're trying to keep her out of that while also trying to keep her possibly fed in a way, but she hasn't truly fed yet, because this is one of those vampire lore things that they say Jim Butcher's vampires is, if they don't feed, they might not become a vampire. You might be able to forego the hunger enough to bypass the full transition into vampirehood, so to speak. And a lot of this exposition comes about when there's another post Black Court of Vampire attack on Harry outside the studio. Just, one of those fortuitous moments that this occurs. And again, we get another adventurous bout of action to bring us along the story. And again, that does help with the absorbing and just flying through the pages of this book. You're getting it constantly. And here even you get more rules of the world, where the White Court and Harry actually do a truce to fight the Black Court and survive. And all these tidbits come out in the aftermath of doing all this. So now let me just segue for a moment, if you'll allow me. So in writing, from what I've learned from watching things online, there's a very interesting device that writers and authors use when they write their stories, where some actions might follow a certain structure, or even plot devices and whatnot. So, for instance, let's say you're going to introduce a special weapon, okay? And the weapon might even have a high cost to it, but it's going to be necessary for later on in the book. First, someone might describe that the weapon exists, or they'll tell you what the job does, or the weapon does, let's say, and they've seen it used before, or whatever else. And they give you all like the history and the backstory of it. So they kind of like set up the fact that this thing exists. And that whets your beak with interest. The next step might be that you might actually see it in action by another character. And they give you a pretty awesome scene saying, oh, this is what it does and this is how it does it. Okay. A third step might be that your hero gets to use it, and they might get to use it in like a non-climax portion of the book. Okay. And generally when this happens, you might see it fail, where the limitations might be more corporeal, or the results might be more negative than the antagonist wanted it to be. And then later on, the hero is going to succeed, possibly during the climax when it's needed, and then there's much rejoicing. It becomes like a try-fail, try-succeed aspect to getting people, to follow the notes in the story you write. There's a memory of this I have when I read Ender's Game, or even if you saw the movie Ender's Game, let's say. He goes into the zero-G fighting arena, and you get a tutorial on how those weapons work, where they have to charge up, you fire, you freeze the opponent. Okay? He gets the tutorial, he gets out there, maybe gets frozen fast, and we see others successfully using the weapon. Another encounter happens, and he's using the weapon, and maybe he tries to fire too quickly, but it's not recharged by then, he gets frozen again. Okay? Try, fail. And then lastly, not the climax per se, but maybe of this zero-G training, you see he utilizes the getting frozen aspect of the weapons intentionally, and he does it to a tactical advantage, and he uses it to win. It might not be the best example in the world, but it's what I got at 6:30 in the morning, for the moment. So why do I even say this? Why even bring up this little segue? Okay. We get to see this concept in action in this book story with this curse that's going around, because Harry has to see it in action. He has no leads to go by, except for there might be someone who has a reason to make this production fail. So he has a partial motive, and that's it. And he's doing his amateur sleuthing in the studio, and at one point, he actually, like, feels this curse coming. Like, the air tingles and things go cold or whatnot. But he knows something magical is barreling its way down upon his location, okay? And there's amazing detail, by the way, here with this thing, where this force barrels down the hallway, like right past Harry, seeking out a specific person, and whammo, tries to kill them outright. And luckily our hero is there, and he might be able to use some of his magical effects to maybe, like, prevent the curse from not killing them, but there is damage done. So this gives Harry a lead as to what's going on, the type of person that could possibly even cast this kind of a curse, and maybe even some limitations of saying, well, it can't be this group of people, and it can't be those. It's got to be someone who has that ability or access to that ability. So it gives him leads, okay? And then another time, this curse comes back again for another victim, and although he knows someone's behind it, when they're faced off and this happens, Harry's actually got a gun pointed at him, so he can't do anything because the guy or girl is gonna shoot him. So, and the curse goes off, and the gun goes off, and being an entropy curse the way it is, the bullet kind of like magical bullet finds its way around the room and out the hall and kills another actress. And then the person who had the gun in their hand screams, throws the gun to Harry, says, hey, he shot her, and it goes from there. So now Harry gets two examples of this curse working in his presence, so to speak. So, and now he's, by the way, a suspect in the second murder. So the heat comes on. So you get more consequences to what's going on, and now he's got to, like, investigate the studio and avoid the studio simultaneously, because if he's in jail and prison, he can't figure out what's going on and save people. So again, this being a day in the life, it's pretty interesting, and it's starting to not have the feel so much of the side quest anymore, or a one-off adventure, and it's riveting. It absolutely is very riveting. Long story short, and I'm trying not to spoil as much as possible, we get to find out that, yes, the curse definitely is a plot against the producer, and there's a pretty pointed reason for this, and there's a sound motive, and there's also a pretty good story of why this thing isn't just killing a specific person, that it's going around and killing many people, okay? Because things are not as they appear, okay? And it turns out that, when this thing's happening, Harry learns that there's a backer behind this. So there's the people who are creating the curse, who really don't know what's going on as much. Like, they know the motives and everything else, but the people who can create the curse is now the extra layer that he's got to stop the people who are doing it, and then stop the person who's really making this a thing. And through everything else, we've got the Black Court just making a mess of everything, and the random encounters that Harry has to face. And the White Court's always hanging around, with Thomas helping Harry, and Laura is at the scene of the curses, and the future of Inari turning or not turning to deal with. And then we've got, like, the trump card, so to speak, where there's the ace up the sleeve, which really brings everything together, and you go about with, as you follow the story, and I know it's kind of difficult to do this without spoilers, but you're trying to tie up loose ends, because there's a power dynamic behind this little coup d'etat in the porn industry. And there's even a big, huge, hot tamale of a reveal in this one that changes Harry's life forever. So, as I say, I can't say enough about this book series. I'm just absolutely loving these stories, and I want you to get in on this too. And like I said, they're meaty, 450 pages, but you read it like it's only 200 because it's so damn interesting of a page turner. Okay? And I've actually already just finished reading the next one. Okay? This is Deadbeat, which is 515 pages long. And that will be out as soon as I can finish my notes on it. So with these thick books, you get a really big bang for your buck here. Okay. And like I said, I think there's 17 novels in the book series so far. There's also short stories and graphic novels with original material in them. And there's even a few online vignettes, or I think they call them microfiction, that Jim Butcher has put out there. So it's just great stuff that Jim Butcher is producing with this storyline, with this genre. I didn't think I was going to be as all in on this series as I have become, but I highly recommend it to you. Support this man so we can see more in the future. I'd even love to see a new installment drop by the time I catch up to the end of the novels that I have on my bookshelf behind me. Other than that, you're going to see me back here mighty soon with the next one in this series. So I want you to take care, keep reading, keep listening, keep watching. Have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. I've took you here for about 46 minutes already. Take it easy, all right? Bye-bye now.